Hello, I'm Daniela. Did you know that you can use crayons, regular Crayola crayons, on fabric? You'll heat set it and then you could create a custom image that you want to use in your slow stitching, or even on a t-shirt or a scarf. I like to use these images to make custom designs. Perhaps I wanted a particular flower that I don't have in fabric, or I want to make something that I can embroider and embellish a little further. Instead of just using complete embroidery, I have that image that I've created with crayon. And it uses really common supplies. Aside from your crayons, you'll need an iron and some paper towels. There are a few other supplies you can use just to make this task really easy and look very professional. The results are fantastic. I love that I can personalize something to the color scheme or the images that I want. So let me show you how I do it.
So there are a few tools and techniques that make using crayon on fabric really easy and helpful to do. You'll want to start with your cotton fabric here. And I have a tea towel and some muslin, and I'll show you on both of the fabrics. The muslin is very thin. I find using a solid color of fabric is ideal, but you don't have to be limited by that. You'll also need your iron, and that's an extremely important tool for this technique. Now the other techniques and the other tools are optional. They just make it a little easier, but use what you have. The other thing you'll need is either some plain paper or some paper toweling. I prefer the paper toweling. I think it's a little more absorbent than plain paper, but use whatever you have. Again, I think that's crucial for making this work and making this work efficiently. So to start with, we're going to iron our fabric. You want to keep it nice and flat and pristine. So I'll just take my little ironing mat here, and just the area where I'm going to draw, make my little patch or my little image, I'll just make sure that I iron it on the front and the back, just briefly, and just to make it nice and pristine. So I'll do that on both the muslin and the tea towel. You basically want to get out any wrinkles that remain on the area where you're going to draw. So that's what I've done here. Now you could put a backing onto the fabric, a temporary backing. And so here I have some freezer paper. Freezer paper has one side that's just paper and one side that is waxy. So just to show you, I'll attach it to the tea towel, just the backing here. And I only need to use a small piece, a piece just large enough for my drawing. This is going to be much bigger than my drawing, but it will work just nicely. So I just take and I put the wax side down up against the fabric, and then just with a hot iron, I'm just melting that wax into the fabric, and it's just temporary. It gives me a little bit more of a backing on that fabric so that when I go to draw on it, I have something a little more substantial to work with. So I just press all around. Again, this helps keep the fabric flat. And I'll let this cool, and then when I flip it over, I have a nice pristine surface to work on. For my muslin though, I'm not going to use a backing. I'm not going to iron any backing on it. One tip is to take a little piece of sandpaper and just stick it behind your fabric so that when you draw, the fabric grips to the sandpaper. I'll just make sure that there are no wrinkles or pieces of thread behind the fabric. And so then I have my muslin ready to go. We'll start the drawing here on the muslin. So I have a waterproof and fade-proof pen here. This is just a micron pen. And I'm just going to create a very simple line art image here. I think I'll make it just a pumpkin. So I'm just tracing it around just the different sections of the pumpkin. Do that on this side. And this is just in case you can't find the image that you want to create or you want for your piece. I have something like a pumpkin here. You don't have to use the permanent pen. That's completely optional. Now you want to come in here and start coloring your image. So these are just a Crayola box of crayons. I happen to like them best. You can use whatever crayons you like. You'll get different results based on the formula of the crayons. You want to use a wax-based crayon as opposed to an oil-based. Most crayons that you purchase for kids are in fact wax-based, but there are some that are oil-based, so just keep that in mind. It will specifically mention oil-based on the crayon. The worst case, if you do use an oil-based, just be prepared it might smudge a little more than the wax-based crayons. So it's not the end of the road if you use oil-based. It's just preferable to use the wax-based. And while you can buy fabric crayons, I happen to think that the standard crayons are very good. So now there's a couple of schools of thought on creating your drawing using the crayons. One is to go in there with a white or a color that matches your background, and you just lightly fill in, very lightly, all the layers where you're going to color on with that white. Now the white isn't going to show, but it is creating a background so that the weave is filled in with the crayon. And it doesn't use your colored crayon, it will use just the white crayon. And then all your other layers you'll put down on top of it. I find when working by coloring on fabric, especially if it's not stretched out in a embroidery hoop, you just want to always kind of continue to go along, hold the fabric taut. You can even tape it down if you want, but still keep in mind that you might have to make some adjustments. And then I like to go in and build up light layers. So because it's a pumpkin and I'm going to make it an orange pumpkin, I'm going to come in here with a little yellow first, and I'm just going to add a light layer of yellow. And as you can see, all of my strokes are being pulled downward. This is just an easier way to work on fabric so that the fabric doesn't bunch up. You can try and make scribbles, but I find that the moving downward, always in the same direction, is the best way for me. So I'll continue coloring this all. I have one layer of yellow on everything here. I'll even do it on the stem. And this is over the light layer of white. And now from here, once I have that layer down, I can start to build up the different colors. So I go in with my next lightest color, the orange, and where the shadows are, I'm just going to start creating some of those lines, and also at the base of the pumpkin. If I want to add some color to the front segment, I'll do that coming down from the top and on the sides, but I'm leaving a good portion of yellow exposed. And this is just one technique. You can certainly do it many ways. I'll come on the other side here and add a little more of that orange, covering up just a little bit of that yellow. Then I like to just take a look at what I've done, go back in and decide where I want to add more color. I'm not going in with just one layer of color and calling it a day. You can do that and your results will vary, and that's okay. You might really enjoy that result. I know from experience I like to add a lot of layers. I like that look that it gives. So now I'll take another color of the orange, and I'm going over some more of that area that I've already colored in. Again, still leaving the previous colors exposed in certain areas, not all of them. Adding a little bit less on the layers so far. But as you can see, with each time I stroke the color here, I stroke the crayon on the fabric, I'm getting a more intense color. Finally, I'll take my last color. And again, I'm just trying to build up more shadows. Now this isn't a process where it's one and done. It can be, if that's what you like. But don't feel you need to get it all done right away, the exact way you want. Just come back in and add more layers, blend, and that's what gives the nice appearance, the appearance of something a little more in depth than just a solid color. Not that there's anything wrong with a solid color, but sometimes it's nice to have a little more graduation and shading. And on the last one, I do like to come over to the edge. So now I have most of the pumpkin done, but it's not complete. So I'm going to go back in with a medium color and just blend over some of those lines. Still leaving some of that yellow exposed, but I'm brightening up those other layers. I can go back in, maybe with the yellow, add a little more to that. Again, it just makes a little more pop of color and it brightens up some of the areas. So that looks pretty good. I can come back in now, choose some greens, and work on the stem. So I'm adding more layers to the stem, just to the way I did with the segments of the pumpkin. And then to make it a little more realistic, I might come in here with a little bit of green and just kind of blend it around the different segments. Play around, adding more colors. So once you think you have it done the way you like, now it's time to set it with our iron. So what we want to do is melt the wax from the crayon, but leave the dye from the crayon staining the fabric. So now I'm going to remove the sandpaper because I don't need it on the back. So now I'll take my pressing mat again. If you use an ironing board, use the ironing board. I like to have a paper towel on the bottom of my area here, just in case anything leaches out. And then I take my paper towel and I'll fold it twice, just on top of that pumpkin. I want to take my hot iron and just press it on top of that pumpkin. Now it's the iron setting for the fabric. You don't want to go higher than the iron setting for your fabric. And now I'm just going to press it on the other side just to complete my image. This is a small iron, so I have to do 2 bouts of this. And I can just keep coming back and forth. And so now I'm just going to lift up my paper towel. You can see I have a little bit of transference of the wax. And there is a little bit of dye in there as well. So now I'm just going to take my paper towel again, and I like to double layer it, and I'm going to do the same thing again. And I'll do this until the paper towel comes away clear, where there's no indication that there's any more wax coming up from the crayon drawing. So I have it this way, and that looks pretty good on the underside. I can see a little bit of residue, so it's not quite done yet. So I'll take another section, and this time, because I've already pressed it twice, I'll just do 1 layer of paper towel. And I don't want to move my iron, I just want to press it in place. If I move my iron, there's more of a chance that it smudges. I remove that paper towel, and again I'm seeing just a little bit of smudge. So I want to come back in and do this again. This is not really a procedure that you can rush. So I have 4 times I've pressed the top, and it's looking pretty good. I want to take that paper towel, set it on top of my pumpkin, and now I'm just going to flip it over. And I'm going to heat set it from the back. I'm doing my best to remove all the wax from my drawing and absorb it into the paper towel. There's no residue that I can tell on the back here. I'll just do 1 more pressing just to be safe. And so now I have my pumpkin. Now if I wanted to make the colors more vibrant, because by pressing it with the heat, I removed a little bit of that vibrancy, I would simply let it cool, set it back down on that sandpaper, and then just go over the layers again. Just like this. So I'll do that same procedure until I'm happy with the results. And you can do this over and over again. So again, after I have my pumpkin the way I think I want it, I'll go through that whole procedure where I reset it with the iron, using my paper towels on the back and the front. So there I have my little illustration that I created on fabric using crayons. And if this was something I wanted to launder, I would heat set it probably 2 more times just to make sure it was really set. If it's something you're going to launder like a t-shirt, you'll want to wash it with cold water and then probably hang it out to dry rather than put it in a dryer. But a lot of people say they have really good results, that once you get rid of the wax, nothing transfers. This can be sewn through if I wanted to embroider over it. So it's really very handy. Now let me show you how I create an illustration using the tea towel and the freezer paper background. So the procedure is the same as when I use the sandpaper background on the piece of muslin. I'm going to use my micron pen and just make a sketch, just maybe of a little flower here. Again, it's a little awkward drawing on fabric, just because there is that texture there. And the tea towel has a little more texture than the muslin. And then I'll just create a stem here. And a leaf. Then I'll add just a few little circles inside the flower here. So now I'm going to color it the same way. I'm not going to use the white though for the background. So I'll just choose some colors here. So again, I just color it in the same way in that I make light layers, always going in the same direction. This time I just happen to be going up instead of down, but my fabric isn't bunching or moving. By being attached to the freezer paper, it's a little more secure than the sandpaper. It doesn't have that grip that the sandpaper has, but it's still pretty secure. And I just build up my layers. The beauty of using crayons is that there are so many beautiful colors in the box, and you can buy a large box, 64 or even larger, so you can get almost every color imaginable. You don't have to worry about making so much of a blend to get your own colors. I like to take advantage of those beautiful colors in the box of crayons. I can really tailor the image and the colors to what I want for my piece. Then I'll just come back in with a little bit of darker colors to make that nice blend. Now when it comes time to heat set this, you'll want to do the same procedure. I'm going to remove the freezer paper from the back just by peeling it. Then I'll add a paper towel to the backing. Make sure that that paper towel is flat and flush, and I'll take my top paper towel and press it. And again, the image is a little larger than my iron, so I'll just press it about 30 seconds on each side. Your goal is just to transfer any of that wax from your image onto your paper towel. Now the fabric that you're using, the tightness of the weave, how much pigment and wax it holds, you'll get different transfer. So there's no universal expectation. I'll do it one more time. That second one seemed to have just a little bit of residue. So I'll press it, heat set it one more time. So then you can decide if you want to add additional layers of crayon to increase the vibrancy. Just wanted to show you a couple of other techniques that you can use using the crayons and your fabric. So now you can easily take a stencil or an object with texture and put it behind your fabric to create that texture, that image. So then you'll take any type of crayon, and if you rub it up and down, like a rubbing from a tree or a stone, you can get that texture. And you can use that in your stitching. Here are some additional examples, again, using the same technique I showed on the muslin and the little rubbing technique. So you have very interesting results. The reason you heat set your fabric is so that it doesn't transfer. If you're using your piece in some slow stitching, you don't get a lot of transfer anyway, but if you're using it in something like a fabric book or a t-shirt or a scarf or a brooch, there is a concern for transfer. So that's why we heat set it. Some people say that they get very little transfer or bleeding after the heat set. I haven't had a problem with transfer, but then again, I don't use this technique very often. And on the objects that I use it on, they don't get a lot of handling, so that hasn't been a concern for me. If it is a concern, you can get this colorless extender. It's for textile medium. It's like a little liquid. You would paint it over your image, just with a paintbrush, let it dry, and then you heat set this, and that will guarantee that there's no transfer. So that's something to consider as well when you're using your crayons to make a very custom image.
So that's how I use crayons to customize an image. I can make a patch, which can then be made into a brooch, or I can use that little patch on my slow stitching. Or, as I showed in class, I can embellish a tea towel and use it in my home. So the addition of crayons with fabric really takes that fabric further, and I can do so much more with it. Who knew you could do that with Crayola crayons? If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And please consider becoming a paid member of my channel. Thanks for joining me today.